Okay, so first we're going to talk a little bit about what supportive structure is and why it might be important. And structure. So, what would everyone here define it? Think of what is meant by structure. When you hear course structure, what do you think about?
Like how things are set up,
Okay, something that's set up,
organized.
organized. So you want organization in your course, and you want organization that makes sense. And if you have multiple modules in your course, you might want to keep the organization similar in each module. One thing that I've heard faculty sometimes say, and I generally objected when they have, is that one of the first things I do in my course is I have a scavenger hunt where I ask students to find certain things. And my reaction to that is if students have to really struggle and put a lot of cognitive effort into finding things in your course, it's probably not a well-designed course. You don't want to have students focusing on trying to figure out where things are. You want a nice logical structure that makes it easy. Other things that structure might involve.
I think about even from a course design perspective is what are my outcomes or objectives and how do I reverse engineer that so the assignments and the readings and the lectures are clearly connected to that.
Okay, exactly. That, yeah, you want to have a backwards design process is ideal. What do you want students to get out of the course? How you're going to measure that and how you're going to provide material to help them get there. So you basically have to start with what your goals are, what you want a student to achieve, and then work backwards to providing them with the resources and of how to get there. Anything else?
Would it be right to say the framework of your design?
What was that again? I'm sorry.
Is it the framework of your course design?
Yeah, the framework of your design can be important. Yes. Okay. Anything else?
Foundation and integrity.
Foundation and integrity, that you want everything to hang together and you want to have a solid base for students in there so that, you know, there was a time when instructors used to just kind of walk into class. They might have read something in the news that day and then they just wing it from there. That doesn't work that well in terms of student learning, and it certainly doesn't work as well for all students. So, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do to build in a little bit more structure. One way of thinking of it is you want to provide supportive structure, sort of like the infrastructure for their learning. So there's a lot of studies, and we're just going to touch on it here, but I will provide some references to that in here. There's a lot of studies that indicate that by providing students with more course structure, students learn more. One of the classic studies was done in biology by Friedman, Hack, and Wendereth back in 2011. Eddy and Hogan have a study showing that adding more structure, moderate structure to a statistics class significantly increased. Well, in both of these studies, they found that everyone learned more when, in terms of on standardized assessments and so forth, when more structure was applied to the course. But what both of these studies found is that the equity gaps, the gaps between first gen and continuing generation students and between underrepresented minority groups and so forth and other groups all shrunk. That in general, the students who tended to do least well on average in other courses gained the most by adding more structure to the course. And that's especially true for first gen students. Barr and Wessel showed this in math. And there have been many, many studies. These are just a few suggestive ones in STEM fields. But that's where we often have some of the worst outcomes in terms of equity gaps and in terms of student success rates nationwide. And Kelly Hogan and Vishy Sathi has a book, Inclusive Teaching. We did this for a reading group a few years back, and it's a really great book that summarizes much of the research on structure and other things in terms of providing more equitable classes. And one of the nice things about building structure in is that it helps all students again, but it especially helps those students who are often left behind. And part of the issue is just revealing the hidden curriculum, making clear what your expectations are for all assignments, using perhaps rubrics and multiple exemplars. The other thing that's really important, especially in STEM fields where students come in with very different backgrounds, is give students the resources they need to be successful when they need it, so that giving them feedback if they're struggling with something and giving them access to some support services, which could be just telling them to stop in and talk to you, or if you have some, undergraduate teaching assistants, working with them, or perhaps the writing center or the teaching, the advisement center, not the advisement center, the student support centers and so forth, do provide, the tutoring centers provide some support as well. But again, giving them resources, and a simple thing you can often do is just find some YouTube videos. And if students are struggling with a concept, you can give them some feedback saying, here's some additional things that might allow you to see this in a different framework. Sometimes just hearing someone else's examples or other ways of viewing something can be really helpful. And there are so many videos out there on many of the skills that our students struggle with, because everyone is facing some challenges, and many people have come up with some really effective videos. In some courses, the crash course videos put together have been really helpful. They have some really great videos in economics and in history and many other fields. But there's a lot of good ones out there, but you should look through them yourself first to make sure they really are addressing the learning objectives that you want. Another thing that has been found to be really important is, as part of the structure, letting students know that you want them to be successful is really important. Yeager and et al. A study back in 2020, I thought it was earlier than that, but in any case, wise feedback has been, I may have made a mistake on that, sorry, is an approach where when you give students feedback, you basically just say, and some people heard this last time, but in the last session, but basically you give students feedback which says, I expect that you're able to do high-level work. I hold you to high standards. I believe you can be successful with it, but here's what you need to do to be successful. That type of feedback is much more effective than just merely stating what they need to do to improve their work. Adding that resulted in a substantial increase in student grades, in student work, and student motivation, and in terms of the improvement in resubmissions on work. It was really a remarkable result that was done with a very large sample. And I accidentally clicked on that, but there's a link to all these, and I'll share these slides later. I think I do put that in at the end. If not, I will link to it. Another study that was done by Carell and Kurlander in 2020 suggests that when students, this was done in a large economics class in multiple institutions with a lot of students engaged in this, is if you give students feedback after the first couple of assignments, particularly after the first one, letting them know that, it's normal to struggle with this material, and that here are some resources you can use. Here are my office hours, and I want to help you and support you in this. Just doing that resulted in eliminating many of the equity gaps completely, or at least reducing them. And they found in particular that it particularly reduced the equity gaps for Black males, Black and Hispanic males, I believe, which was one of the groups that had been experiencing some of the larger equity gaps in previous versions of the course. Or they actually did a treatment and a control group, and they found a fairly substantial impact of that. Just a couple of messages that were sent out to students when they received their grades. Another study done just a year or so ago by Canning, White, and Davis found that growth mindset messaging was really important, which is very similar to what Carell and Kurlander did, except they did it in I believe it was a biochemistry class. And what they found is that, again, it was a random controlled experiment where half the students were exposed to it, half of them were not. Everyone received feedback, but the students who received feedback, that includes some growth mindset messaging saying, you're capable of doing this, that is normal. Again, it's normal to struggle with this material, but these are the things you need to do to be successful. The other group just said, here are some things you need to be successful. So basically, it was just adding that simple growth mindset message that completely eliminated the first gen continuing generation gap in performance. So that's one type of structure. We're going to talk about some ways of automating that in just a minute. Some of the things, what we'll be talking about specifically, are using checklists, providing support resources, perhaps organizing them using accordion files to keep things compact so it's not so overwhelming for students, using intelligent agents to remind students of due dates that are coming up, and also to provide some of that growth mindset messaging, and also to share support resources and to remind them that you are there to support them. So actually, let me just, I thought I put in a QR code, but apparently I didn't. So I am going to share, let me make sure it's set to actually be shareable. So, and it wasn't. So I am going to share this with anyone with the link. I'm going to copy the link and I'll drop it in chat. And I'm doing that in case you want to go back and look at any of those resources, because those studies, either the papers or the podcasts where these things were discussed, can be useful. Okay, so what we're going to do though now is actually hop over to Brightspace. And this is where I'd like everyone just to follow along. And I'm going to hop into one of my fall classes where, well, actually, no. I'm going to hop into a spring class, which I should have copied. No, I'll use my fall class. Okay, so let's do this. Here I have some things already set up. I was going to go into here, but okay, let's try some things. So the first thing is checklist. And the way you build a checklist, and this is something you do typically after you have the overall course designed, is you go to course tools and you go to course admin, so course tools, course admin, and then you go down to checklist under assessment. And you just click on that. And then you create a checklist. So here are some, I have a checklist for each of the modules I've used in this class. And ever since we started using Brightspace, I started putting in checklists. And on student feedback at the end of the semester, some students would always write, one of the most useful things they received from the course was the checklist, and that they wished all instructors would use them. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's really helpful for students just to provide that structure, just to provide some reminders of when things are due. And the way a checklist works is you go in, I'm going to edit one. Well, I'll show you what it looks like. Well, this is going to take it into the edit. But basically, here are the things they have to do in that first week. Because this is in Waymaker, there's a consent form that allows Lumen Learning to use a research. And it's just a reminder that they have to do that before they start their course. They don't have to share their data, but if they want to share it so that they can improve the course, they can. There's a study plan, which is basically a self-paced thing that students work through. There are some videos that I created that they have to do on some of the topics students find most challenging. There's a study plan. These are different topics in the study plan. There's another video later. And you notice for each of these, and there's also an introductory discussion forum, and there's also due dates on all of those things. And so basically what happens, and also there's a mention to review videos as needed. So I have a whole series of YouTube videos that they can look at and so forth. But it's not really very difficult to create a checklist. Once you create the first one, by the way, I should have stopped where I was. You always have the option of copying it. So if you're using similar assignments in different modules of the course, you create the first one, and that can be a template for the next one. And then you just basically go in, you update the information relevant to the module, and so on. But let's do a new checklist. So we'll create one here, and let's call this module 25. I don't have 25 modules, so I know I won't accidentally try to use this checklist in this course. And here you could put in a description. Most people don't, but you could If you wanted to, you could put your learning objectives for the module here. I put that in a separate website, on a separate page on the opening of the module. But now that I've created it, here, you could save it. You may want to open it in a new window when viewed. I leave it just in the regular view, so it's just part of the process. And here, right now, I've done that. I created it. So I created it, but I want now to add to it. Okay. And now there's two things there. You can add categories or items. Some people only use items, and that would just simply be a list of the things that are that you're going to do. Some people will use categories. I do use categories. So for example, you might have a category which is read these things. So that would be one category of things. Another would be to write, or it could be written assignments. It could be quizzes. It could be whatever. So however many things you want to group your task for students into, you can. And let's say we want to create a new category, which is just called reading. So you could just say read, and then you could put in a paragraph there, but typically people leave that blank, because while you could put in a lot more detail here, there's other places where it may be more appropriate. So the category is just a way of grouping this material, and we'll create a new item. And here, let's say I want to be really ambitious, and let's say I want students to read The Wealth of Nations, which is a book published back in 1776, which is about 800 or 900 pages. They probably won't read that in the first week, but let's just say I want them to do that. I could put in a description, where you say, pay particular attention to this, or focus on these things. And here you can put in a due date, and let's say we want this due tomorrow. That's sort of like how it was done in grad school. And you put in a time if you want, and then you have the option of displaying it in the calendar. And those calendar reminders are really important for students, really helpful for students. So think about, did my camera just go off? No, that's someone else named John. If you could put your full names in there, just so we have it for the attendance list. Okay, so what you can do here is put in a description if you want. If you want to put in a calendar reminder, you can. So let's say we want this to be in the course reminder. Actually, I'm going to turn that off, because when it rolls over, I don't want that accidentally showing up with due dates of next year for February. And then save it. And this becomes now part of your checklist. So the Module 25 checklist has this one item. Let's say I want to create a new category, and let's say submit is the requirement there, and as a category. And let's say we want to save that, and let's say one item in there might be to submit quiz 1, let's say. And then you could put information. You could say you have multiple attempts or whatever, or that could be done elsewhere. And I see there's something in chat. Let me see. Okay. So what happens here? Oh, you're not able to see my screen? Oh, no. What screen did I share? I will stop the sharing and try again.
I
I think
see.
if there's a
I can see
pop-up,
your screen.
Okay, so I was sharing. Okay, good. So let me share that again. I did get a message saying that someone couldn't see it, but let me try
if
now.
there's a pop-up, John, then the pop-up doesn't show up. The original screen share continues to show.
Okay, but now can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. And the question, Rayhan's question was, does it not pull the due date from the assignment? It does. So you would only use typically you don't want to have two due dates for the same assignment showing up in the calendar. If you have an assignment where it's built into Brightspace, where you've already assigned a due date, that will automatically appear as long as you specify the due date in the assignment, will appear in the student's calendar. But if it's something where you're asking students to read a book outside of the course, you generally, unless you have an assignment tied to that with a due date, it won't appear. So if you want students to do something that's outside of what's built into Brightspace, then you might want to check this. So that's something you should be careful about, just so you don't make it look like you've got twice the amount of work due for students than they actually have. So check that if it's something that is not already specified as being part of the due dates within Brightspace. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, and so, let's say quiz one, and let's say we want that to be due. Oh, let's give students a little more time for that. Let's have that due on Sunday. Okay, so we've saved that, and we'll leave that out because that's already going to be in the quiz assignments with the due date. Because otherwise, you get two listings, which doesn't really serve to remind students twice as much. It just serves to clutter up their calendar a bit. And then save. And then, so this is how you create it. And once you created it, and you can add as many items to each category as are appropriate. You may have students do multiple readings. You may have students do, perhaps watch a video or attend an event or write up a response to the event, etc. Okay, so this creates a checklist, but what you have to do though is you have to put the checklist in the course. And the way you put the checklist in the course is you go into one of your modules, and let's say I want to add something here. I want to add an existing activity, which is a checklist. So once you've created it, you go into a module, you choose checklist, and then it will tell you which one, and then you choose which one you want to place where. And I don't want to duplicate any of the others, so I'm going to put in this module 25 checklist right here. It's going to go down to the bottom, but what I generally will do is I'll put the checklist right up at the top, because by putting it at the top of the module, it's the first thing I'll put it right below the overview. So in the module, I have an overview that describes what they have to do, states the learning objective. We'll take a look at that. States the learning objectives for the course, and so forth. But when students look at this, what will happen is they will see the checklist. Will this be? Yeah, it will be something like this, except in the student's view, basically, they see a little checkbox next to each of these. And I could go into the student view. You may want to try that on your own. But when students see it, they'll see a whole list of things with the due dates. And basically, they just check a box when they've completed it. And I've reminded students to do it because it helps them keep track of what they've done and what they haven't done. And it really, in terms of structure, it really helps if everything is organized in a logical pattern within the module. Now, I am going to go back in here and get rid of this checklist because I really don't want to accidentally roll this over into the next semester. And another simple thing you can do to customize, this is more for aesthetics, you can create your own banner images and put them in the headers. And this module happened to be on Perfect Competition. So I went into Canva, found some images and created my own, or created, and I've done that, I think, for all the modules. But I'm going to get rid of the module 25 checklist. So actually, let me, I'm going to probably get rid of that whole thing, so it's just not cluttering up my stuff there. Now, I will go into student view and take a look at what this looks like in terms of the structure. And the student view is right here. And I'll go back to this module, it doesn't really matter which one, and also you can create banners for your courses too. That was, again, some stock photos from Canva. But I'm going to go in here and, it took me right back to the module. So now when I look at the checklist, this is how it looks from the student's perspective. And see, these are the things that are due. They just check it off as they do them. So they had to complete these things. They could view these things. And I guess those were the only categories I used in this particular course. But that's a checklist. It's a really simple thing. And again, once you create the first one, you just copy it and update it for whatever assignments are in each of your courses. And it's not very hard to do after you do the first one. Any questions on checklist? Okay, then I think the next thing, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you create a checklist that has, say, complete a homework assignment as one of the items, can you put in links to the homework assignment if that homework assignment is paired through My Math Lab or other Pearson products or anything like that?
Yes, as long as there's a URL that allows you to directly connect to that, you could embed that right in the assignment, right in the checklist. So if you can get directly access that, and students don't have to go through a separate authentication or whatever to get to the link, you can do that. You should be able to do that. Try it, but it should work. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, then the next thing I think we were going to do, let me actually drag this back over because I don't want to forget anything. So the next thing we were going to do is add some other accordion files. Okay, so let me show you what it looks like again while we're in a student view here. And so when I put together review videos, you notice it says review videos as needed. What I've done is I've broken them up to the different learning objectives, and there's sort of like sub-modules within a course. They're not actually sub-modules, but they're subtopics within a course. And for some reason, Brightspace is being kind of slow here today. But what you'll see is it's all done within an accordion. And so instead of seeing all of the videos that I provided for students, it's a nice simple thing. So these are the three subtopics within this module. There's perfect competition, and if they want to look at these things, they can just go there and it will automatically expand. And I put the embed code in so students will just see what the videos are. They just click on it and it just starts playing. It makes it really simple as a way of sharing these resources. And similarly here, here's some Khan Academy videos. Here's some other ones out there. And similarly, the long run and efficiency in long run markets. Okay, so in any case, instead of having all the stuff in the list, by putting it in an accordion folder, it just becomes so much simpler, and it just makes it more compact, and it's easier for students to find things rather than seeing this long scrolling list. So accordion files are a great way of organizing information. If you write up some text materials, you can do the same thing. Each one of those things is basically just HTML material. And the way you create one is, let me get out of the student view, is, let me exit from there, is I'm going to create, basically you just create a document as you normally would. And let me just pick one of the modules. Let's look at labor markets. Here we go. And in here, I'm just going to create a new document. So I'm going to add content. I'm going to create a file, and try following along with this and just to see how it works. And we're just going to put in a title. We don't want to do too much more if we're going to create an accordion, because when we change the style, it's going to erase it. So let's say these are support resources. And you select a document template, and one of those is accordions. And what happens here is you're given a choice of accordions, whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 is the limit on, no, 6 is the limit. And let's say you want to use a 5 accordion one. The way this is set up, basically you delete all the others. And so we'll get rid of the 6, and then we'll go back up and let's say get rid of the 1 through 4, and we'll delete everything above this. And we're left basically with a template for an accordion. If you want, you could just do it in HTML, but most people generally find it easier just to take, unless you become really adept and comfortable with HTML, it's probably easier just to do something like that. And if you made a mistake, just go back, select a document template again, and redo it in case you cut out some of the beginning or the ending HTML. If you need more than 6, you either need to do it using HTML, or you can copy and paste 2 of them together and just stack them somehow. Basically, if you wanted 10, you could copy the 1 through 5, paste it below, and then you'd have, it would still look like one single accordion. Or if you really want to, and this is what I tend to do if I have more, if I want to change it or add one later, is you can go into the HTML, which is right here. And if you're comfortable with HTML, you can see that this is where the accordion starts, right? Let's say Here's accordion 1. Well, let's go back. Let's start with accordion 2. You can see where it starts right here with the card, and you could just copy all that and paste it down. So if you want to add 3 more, you could copy 2 through 5 and paste it at the end and just go back in and edit. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to cancel that. And so what you would do is put in, let's say, topic 1. So we've got this accordion. This will be topic 2, whatever that is. And again, this is just to organize material, to make it more compact, to make it a little bit cleaner, to make it easier for students to find things, because part of structure is making it easier for students to get to the learning materials without digging through a lot of crap, to make it easier to find what they're looking for. And we'll put in, let's call this topic 4. And then basically for each of these, you just go in and you add something. And basically you just edit this like you would a web page. You could insert things, you could insert text, you could just start writing here or paste things from other materials if you've already created something in Word. Insert stuff here. And when you're done, you've created that accordion. And when you're finished, you just click Save and Close. And then you can go into Student View and test it to make sure it all works. And it looks something like this from the student perspective. I never changed the title on this one. And again, they just click on it and it would expand. And I didn't add anything more here other than that insert stuff here. So any questions on accordions? This is more just in keeping stuff organized, to keep things compact, to make it easier for students to find things. Any questions? Okay, well, then we're going to jump to the next topic, which is using intelligent agents. And this is one of my favorite things to do. And students have found it invaluable. In fact, they found it so valuable in the first few semesters, the first few weeks of my course, that they asked me to create 3 or 4 more for each of the modules. So I spent much of this term just adding new intelligent agents, but we're just going to create a couple and get you started on it. So again, in the same course, and you can delete anything you don't want to keep. So, but we're going to go back in here, go to course admin. That's where you get really all the most powerful tools here. And then go to intelligent agents. And these are really powerful. For those who were teaching back with Angel, it gives us back maybe half to 2/3 of the capabilities we've had with Angel before we downgraded to Blackboard. But it's still a sort of subject for those of us who were using that before. But let's do well, see here, you notice I've got a whole bunch of these. These are study time reminders, exam 3, 4, 5, and 6 reminders, a module 10 quiz reminder, module 11 quiz reminder, study plans, quiz reminders, a whole bunch of things in here. And you notice it says, these were the number of students identified. So I asked students to do some work before the class started, do some readings before we discussed it in class. And if they hadn't done it as of, say, a day before, they got a reminder saying, please work through these parts of the study plan, which is, again, the Waymaker package, where they're working through this personalized learning platform so that they come to class prepared, able to work on some of the questions, some of the group activities, some of the active learning activities that they're actually doing in the classroom. But they're being reminded to get prepared. And this was a class of 250 people. And you see module 6, which was probably right around one of our breaks, a number of people hadn't done it a day before. But I did check some of these things like immediately before, and it would get down to 40 or 50 out of 250 students, generally who hadn't done the work right before class. So it got better. A couple of them I must have forgotten to activate. Okay, or I back created them after the fact. Okay, so let's do some simple agents. So click on New Agent. And one of the first things we can do is just create an agent to check on whether students have logged in. Okay. And what we can do there is, let's call it a login reminder. And let's just put this one as test so I don't actually save this one. And you could put in a description of it. That's for your own purpose. Students won't see it. And we could create a category. And let's say we could create a category, and let's say, I'm going to put it, let's say, I'm going to add this called, which is practice example. So I won't keep that, but you could create a category to group them together. And the main reason of that is it just organizes them together to make it easier for you to keep track of all the agents that you create. If you only create one, you don't really need a category if you're only going to create a few. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a login reminder for students. The first thing you want to do, the first thing in the sequence, is to schedule it. And let's say we want to do this weekly. Or you could do it hourly if you really want to harass students, but that probably wouldn't be ideal. Or daily, perhaps if things are really critical and approaching a due date. But let's say we're going to do this weekly. And let's say we want to repeat it every week. And you could have it do it every day if you wanted to. But again, you probably don't want to overwhelm students because they don't always check their email anyway. But let's say we want to send them a reminder on Wednesday, or let's say on Monday even, to see if they're prepared. And let's say we want to do this at, let's say 6 a.m., just to check at 6 a.m. whether, and let's say we want to assign a start date. I'm going to make the start date, let's say later this month, and I'll delete it. And we probably want to put in an end date just so that, this doesn't actually get left behind and so forth. And so then we put in when it begins, when it ends, how often it occurs. And again, it could be hourly, it could be weekly, it could be daily, it could even be annually, which probably wouldn't be very useful as an annual one. But as a criteria, we're going to do what I would suggest is always select all users visible in the class list, because if you choose special roles, that's if you have TAs or if you have other roles in our classes. Mostly our classes are designed just to have instructors and students. Sending a reminder to the instructors would just go to you. That wouldn't be very useful. So you want it to go to all users visible in the class use. That'll go to all students. And now here, we're going to take action on whether they've logged into the course. And here, you notice these first two things look kind of similar, the login activity and the course activity. Login activity is just whether they've logged into Brightspace. And Genevieve, you have a question.
Yes. So the end date, if we were really doing this for the entire semester, it would be at the end of the semester.
Exactly.
Because I want this to roll every week, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you roll this over into another semester, it will roll those dates over again, and you don't have to adjust it. That'll just continue going forward. So login is really, we're checking logins, but login activity is just if they log into Brightspace. You don't necessarily care whether they've logged into Brightspace. You're focused on whether they've accessed the course, because logging into Brightspace and doing their work in a biochemistry class or in a writing class or in a chemistry class, if that's not the class you're teaching, may not be useful. So here, the user has not accessed the course in the last, I'm not sure why these two are the same. Oh, user has not accessed the course in the last. So yeah, so let's say in the last 7 days. So this would be checking whether they've logged in the last week, okay? Whether they've connected into your course. Genevieve, is your hand still up or was that from before? Okay, just wanted to be sure. Okay, so you could also do this if someone has logged in. So you might want to send a welcome. Thank you for coming back to the course or whatever. But typically this type of thing is usually said, to remind students that they perhaps should be there. And now release conditions, you could add other things. We'll come back to that. But that's if you want to use other criteria. And that's where the real power of this lies. But if we go to actions, typically you want to do this every time the criteria is evaluated. Now, if it's something like whether they've submitted something, you might want to only take action the first time they submit it. You may not want to repeat that over and over again. But in this case, so if you only want to send the reminder once, the first week they don't log in, you could choose this. But if it's something that's repeating and you want to check on whether they've logged in the previous week, choose the second one. So every time the agent is run, it will check to see whether that condition is satisfied. And then the only thing you really have as an option here is to send an email from the students. Now, one of the most common concerns here is, we can't use the usual replace strings. We have to use replace strings that are used only in these agents. And what you can do there is check on this. I know this, but it's easy to forget this. So what you can do is click on what special email addresses can I use, and then you will get a pop-up. And then the replace strings that you can use are initiating user, auditors. So I don't think we have auditors here. So it would be the auditors of the user, but I don't think we have that role established here. So what this means is you just put in here, in curly braces, initiating users with closing braces. And what this will do is it will automatically send this to anyone for whom that condition is satisfied. So it will only go to the students who have not logged in the last week. And what you might want to do there, if you have a small class, you may not want to do this if you have 250 or 400 students, but in a small class, you might want to copy yourself on it. Now, if you want students to know that you're going to be copied on it, you could do it this way. If you don't want them to know, you could paste it into a blind carbon copy. And so they'll see this as an email, and this will go to them and so forth. And then again, if you don't want to be copied on it, that's fine. If you want to be copied on it, put your email here or here, depending on whether you want students to see that you're being reminded. And then you could put, let's say, just a checking in or whatever you want to call it, and just write a message to them saying, I see that you have not logged in during the past 7 days. Not the pasty. During the past 7, staying connected, whatever you want to say. Saying connected to the course is important for your success. The progress. And you could also put in, some notes saying, I hope you're okay. If you're experiencing any problems that are interfering with your ability, please contact me and let me know what we can do to help or whatever. But put in some sort of message, and then save and close. And you could also add attachments if you want to provide support resources or something similar, and so forth. And now what will happen is every week, it's not going to happen, because what I didn't do, I forgot one thing, and I probably should have done that. Where did it go? See, I've got a lot of reminders in here. I saved and closed it, and I titled it Why am I not seeing it? Do I have more than one page? I bet I have more than one page. No? Here we go. Okay. It was just hidden. Now you notice it doesn't say the date here. And that's, if you check it and you see it's not listing a date, what you have to do is go back in and click edit, and you have to make it active, because it won't be active. I recommend creating all the criteria, and then don't forget, and this is important, don't forget to click this button saying agent is enabled. And I'm not going to enable this because this is a class from my fall class, and otherwise students would be getting an email in whatever period of time this was defined in, saying that they will, they'd get that email message, that partial email message. But was everyone able to do that? Did that work? Okay. This is probably the simplest type of agent you can set up. Oh, but one other thing you may want to do, and I should have mentioned this as we were doing this, is if we go down to the action, and here, now, this is just kind of a generic sort of email, but one thing you can do that can make it really be big difference is just put hi. And then here, you notice there's this, what replace strings can I use in the subject and message? And again, I know what this is, but if you forget, you can go right here. And typically the only thing you're probably likely to use is the initiating user first name. So what you would do is you would, again, in curly braces, put in curly braces, initiating user first name. And then what would happen is when they get the email, it would be, hi, Jackie, hi, Laura, hi, et cetera. And it would just seem a little more personalized. It would look to them as if it came directly from you. And even having their name on something just makes it feel more personal. There's that cocktail party effect where if there's a crowded room and there's a lot of people talking at once, if you hear your name, all of a sudden it focuses your attention. The same type of thing seems to happen when emails seem to be directed at you personally rather than just a generic thing. And by the way, we can do the same thing with first name in other messages that are not being triggered by this. So if you were just writing an email or an announcement in a group, you could just use first name in curly braces, and that would put the first name at the top of the announcements. A few times last year, I did that in some announcements on the CELT group, and I ended up getting dozens of responses from faculty and administrators who thought the announcement was going just to them. And so I stopped doing it, partly because it was generating a lot of email responses because I was just sending out some general email to everyone in our group. And instead it was being taken as something targeted. But if you do want to send something that's personalized, using that replace string can make a big difference. Okay, any questions on the intelligent agents? Okay. Well, I think the next thing was, actually, one other thing we should talk about here. Let's say we do a new agent here, and let's just say test agent. And this is where things can get really powerful. And I'm not going to create anything else there. And let's just say we want to do it on a specific date and just say a one-time run. And let's say the criteria, and this is where, again, it's really the most powerful. What we can do is we can create a new release condition. And these are the things you can do. You could do it based on whether someone submitted something to an assignment folder, when a student has received feedback on a submission. So if you provide feedback to the students, or if you're doing peer evaluation and someone else provides feedback, students could be notified by an email that they've received some feedback, and that could be triggered automatically. So if you're grading a few things or providing feedback a few things at a time, you can do that. You could do it to remind students that they now have a score on a rubric, or if there was a folder a Dropbox they were supposed to submit things and they haven't by a certain date, you could send them a reminder that this is due next week, or this is due tomorrow, or this is due in the next half an hour. Please get in it, whatever. If you use certificates or awards, you could also let students be notified if you're using some type of gamification or some type of achievements or something similar. You could also tie intelligent agents to whether they've completed a checklist item, whether they've satisfied it, whether they've completed the whole checklist, thanking them for completing all the tasks, or whether it's incomplete, saying, I don't generally do this. I let the students take responsibility for their checklist because not all of them use it, but they do tend to appreciate having it. But if you wanted to, you could really kind of enforce that, or at least send reminders saying you haven't completed the whole checklist, or you haven't completed this item. And you could do that for each item if you wanted to. You could also, if you're having automatic enrollment in groups, do this. You could do it whether they've achieved certain competencies or learning objectives, if those are enabled. And you could also, send a note when people have completed the course. It could be tied to a certificate. You could also check whether they've read something, whether they've opened something, and this is one I use in my online classes, I use all the time, whether they've posted anything on a topic. And let's say I don't do it so much in a class with 250 students, but you could say you have not posted on a particular topic, and then you link to that particular discussion forum as a criteria. So if I'm only going to have one discussion forum in this class. So basically it will list all of them, and this is the only discussion forum here. And then I could create that. And then you have not created any threads in the discussion forum, and then you could choose an email based on that. But you could also do this whether they've received a grade. You could also tie it to a specific grade range. So let me go back to the criteria again. And here under criteria, we could create a new one. We probably wouldn't be tying these together, but let's say we wanted to tie it to something that's self-graded. You could tie it to their scores, whether no grade's been received. So if, for example, they didn't complete some type of quiz or other assignment here, you could choose no grade received, and then you could pick the gradebook item on which they did not receive a grade yet. And that could be used to trigger a reminder that this grade is due. And that way, instead of sending a note out to all the students that they need to complete this, it only goes to the students who haven't completed that work, and just give them enough time so that they can see the announcement and have time to be able to work on it. Usually I do this a day or so before things are due. If it's something larger, I might do it 2 or 3 days before. And it's the same process, though, is basically used for everything. I'm going to cancel that. And I'm also going to cancel this whole one. But any questions on the intelligent agents? You can really customize it. So if a student is failing, you could tie it to the overall course grade. And if a student's grade is below a certain threshold, you could say, I see that you're struggling in class. Let's see if we can work, let's meet and talk about this so that we can come up with some strategies for you to be more successful. And you can automate all that so it automatically goes out to all the students. And an interesting thing is with these automated reminders, students will respond to them. You'll get, and it will come back to you in response. So it's kind of nice. It does get more, even in a large class where students are less likely to come in with questions regularly. By setting it up this way, it seems to be pretty effective in getting students to be more willing to come in and address issues or challenges they have because they've received that invitation. It makes a difference. Any questions? And again, you could share support resources there as well. The other thing I just want to mention is replace strings more generally. And let's say I want to go here to course tools and announcements. And a really nice, friendly thing to do is when you create a new announcement, just put in here at the top of it, let's say, welcome to the course. Let's say you want to put a class welcome in, and you can schedule all these in advance. And then you could put in, say, hi, and then again, in curly braces, first name, closing the curly braces. And the only embarrassing thing is if you use the wrong type of brackets on one side or another, and then it goes out as that text rather than the replace string. And again, emails or group emails or announcements, you can use a first name or a first and last name together. And it just, again, makes it a little bit more personalized. And students do seem to respond pretty positively to this. So those are the things I wanted to mention. Any questions on any of this? Any other suggestions? So these are all nice tools in Brightspace. And, again, I break it up so they start up with an overview, they get a checklist. They're asked to first work through the reading materials, which are all online. It's all free. And Ben, you have your hand is up.
Yes, going through your Brightspace, I saw these pictures you introduced into the course. How did you get about that?
What you do is when you go to a module, let's say if I wanted to edit the module, right at the top, when you say, right here, when you open the module, you get that stuff where it has the due dates, the opening and the start dates and so forth of the modules. You just edit that basically. So you would, so let's say Here, you just click on it, and then you just add the image. And the size of the image should be, let me see if, oh, I don't remember the size offhand, but there are recommended sizes. You want the right in aspect ratio that'll fit without taking up a lot of screen space. Inspect should tell us, and that should tell us no, inspect does not say. Well, what I would probably do is I would download the image and then, sorry about that. I don't remember how to get that directly without downloading and opening it in image editor. But basically, you can experiment with it and get a ratio that works well. And once you do that, you can just use that as a template for other images.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Okay, if anyone has any questions about any of this or needs any help, please let me know. I'm happy to meet with you in person or over Zoom and help you get started with it. And students really appreciate the extra structure, and those reminders can be really helpful because I asked students what was going well in the class, what I could do to help support them more a few weeks in, and they all said the checklists or the reminders were really good, but they wanted them for everything. I only had it for a few things, and they wanted more of them because they said it was really helpful, and it did make a difference. It did result in more students completing work on time, which, you know, it was structured so there were certain things they had to do to get to the next stage. And if they didn't come in prepared with that initial foundation, they'd struggle later. So those reminders made a difference. You know, we all need reminders. Many of us use calendars regularly, and the best and the worst thing about the online calendars on our phones is that it's hard to miss meetings when you get those reminders, which is helpful if it's a meeting you need to be at. It's not so helpful in terms of using our time as efficiently as possible. But in any case, okay. So thank you for being here, and again, I'm happy to help anyone if they have any questions.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
You too.